Hi, this is Rachelle, and I had these two pieces of vellum that I cut in half left over from making vellum pockets. So I wanted to see what I could do with them to make vellum journal covers. So I have some Mod Podge here and a paintbrush, and I'm going to attempt to glue these two together using the Mod Podge. So I'm going to try and attempt to put these two together. It's a little tricky trying to get them together with the vellum rolling up because, as you know, when vellum gets wet, it starts to roll and warp. So I'm fighting with it, trying to get it to work, and then I just decide, okay, this isn't working. Let's try a different way. So instead of having two separate pieces, I'm taking one full letter size piece and folding it in half, and then adding the Mod Podge in, starting from where the fold is and then working my way out to the outer edge. This works a little better, but it is not really ideal. But yeah, as you can see, I just do a section and then I smooth that out and then I work my way out to the outer edge. So that worked much better. I still have some curling, but at least I was able to actually get both pieces together. So I'm just using my ruler to try and spread out the Mod Podge and to also get rid of some of the air bubbles. And it seems to be working. It seems okay. The white splotches that you see there are just where the Mod Podge is wet. So I'm impatient. I'm going to use my heat gun to try and see if I can dry those and get rid of them. So for the most part, I was able to get rid of them, but I still have a few places that look like air bubbles, but it also kind of gives it a different textured look. So I'm going to hold on to that piece, and then this time I'm going to try with glue stick. So I did the same thing. I folded it in half, and then I'm going to start from the fold and work my way out with the glue stick. I think the glue stick is best because it's not completely wet and there's less puckering and wrinkling. So, but doing it this way, I get a much smoother result, as you can already tell. I'm finishing up out to the outer edge and smoothing it down. It looks so much better. It's a smoother look. So I guess it depends on which look you're going for. If you want a clean, smooth look, then the glue stick is best. If you want more of a textured look, then the Mod Podge works fine. And I'm using the Scotch glue. I think it's called Create. So I will link to everything that I use in the description box below. So these are my two starting places for vellum journal covers, junk journal covers. So I'm going to score both of them in the center so that my end cover size will be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So I'm scoring at 4 1/4 in the center. And then on this one, I decided to go over about 1/2 inch and score. I'm not sure that I would do that again, but I did that on either side of the center to kind of give the journal more of a flexible spine, room to grow type of spine or fold. So I went back to the first one and did the same thing. Basically, so that as the journal gets thicker, the spine will round instead of being a sharp fold with an alligator mouth opening, if that makes sense. So here I'm just checking the edges to make sure everything is sealed down, going back on the Mod Podge one and adding a little glue stick to that corner. And so this is what the covers will look like. So they have a translucent like look to them. So here I am starting to build my signatures. These will be one signature journals. So I'm just going through some coffee or tea stained aged paper that I have. And most of it, I'm just folding it in half using my ruler to tear them in half and then fold in half again. And that's my pages. And I'm sorry, I'm a little out of frame for some of this, but I changed my camera situation and I did not realize. So just checking. There's going to be a lot of folding, tearing, and checking to make sure that the pages fit inside the covers and to make sure that they look good. So here I've pulled out some scraps that I had left from another journal that I was working on that's approximately the same size. So I'm just seeing what I can use out of what I had left over from that journal. And there's quite a bit in here that I'm going to pull out and use for these. I have some die cuts, some tickets, a variety of things. So for one of the journals, I'm going to actually use the cluster, and then the other one, I'm going to use the die cuts. There's labels and the beginnings of tags. Envelopes. Okay, so I finished pulling everything out of the scraps that I wanted. I'm going to tear down this digital paper that I had in there and use it in both of these journals. I'm just removing the white border, folding it in half. And here I'm just going to use the ruler to tear where I folded. And then I see that there's a little piece missing on the corner of one. So I'm going to tear off a strip to get rid of the missing corner. So I'm just going to fold them in half and add them as part of the signature in both journals. At first I was thinking that I would put them in the front so that the little florals would show through on the covers. But as I continue to build the signature, things start changing. So here's another piece that was a little torn. So I'm just going to tear the torn part off and use the page. Got some ledger paper, some green paper. So I'm using this one that I'm using the die cuts on the cover. It's kind of a greenery journal. And then the other one I think will be more vintage look. So this was a little file folder that I made with a index card. If you're interested in seeing how I made those, let me know in the comments and I will do a video showing how to make a little file folder with an index card. So here I'm just building the signature for the vintage look journal. And I'm trying not to put too much thought into it other than to try and keep with the look that I chose for each one. Other than that, I'm just using the scraps that I have, leftover pieces from other journals, and I'm just going to tuck those in for when I start embellishing the pages. I decided not to use that tag. It was a little too big. And I'm again just tucking in what I'm going to use on the inside and laying out the covers. So here I'm just working on a piece to back the cluster on the vintage cover, and a little cheesecloth for the vintage cover. And again, I'm just kind of laying these out. This is not necessarily the final look. I'm just playing around with the pieces that I have, things that I just happen to have on my desk to see what I can create. Okay, so this is what I'm working with so far. Then I took a little break and now I am back to work on the signatures. I decided that the books, I wanted them to be more stuffed and that they didn't have enough pages. So I am adding some additional pages to the signatures. This is grid paper and I kind of folded it up to make a pocket on that page. And I'm doing the same thing in the other journal. So I'm just folding up a little bit to make a pocket and then folding that in half. And actually this is digital grid paper, so it's grid paper that I printed and it's lightly tea stained, I believe. So more aged paper. And I do have a video on my other channel showing one method that I use to tea stain, coffee stain, or age paper. If you would like to see another method without using the oven, let me know and I'll do a video over here as well. My other channel is SCRAPCRAFTASTIC, by the way. It's linked in the description box below. So I'm continuing to organize and build the signatures. I went and found some more just random papers. These are digital papers, all except the black. The black is, I think it's 24-pound paper. It's not black cardstock. It's actually paper. So I'm just folding that in half and I'm going to use the ruler to tear that in half and trim up where it didn't tear quite right. And then I'm going to fold it in half again. Then I'm going to use my We Are Memory Keepers tear ruler to tear the edge to get the straight edge off. That's just on the outside edge of the page. And it leaves a nice deckled textured edge on the paper. Just deciding where to add the black paper into the signature. And I think that's kind of going to be my thing. I love to add black paper to these journals. I don't necessarily want a completely vintage journal. I like a little modern touch to my journals, but I do love the vintage digital papers. So I really like to try and mix them up. So again, I'm just using the tear ruler to tear off the white borders, folding what I have left in half, and then using the tear ruler to tear that in half and make my quarter pages. That's basically what these are quarter pages. And these papers are just random papers that I had already printed. Usually when I buy a digital, I print them out just because I'm excited and I want to see what it looks like. And sometimes I have misprints, but I keep those as well. But these were actually good prints. I just don't remember where I got the digital papers from. The pumpkins that you'll see shortly, those are a digital that I created and they're actually a misprint. But yeah, I try to use everything. And I think misprints are the most fun to try and make them work with whatever journal I'm making. This one I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it because I know that that bird is in the middle and I'm going to chop off his head when I tear them in half. So, but yeah, I'm going ahead and removing the borders. And I'm not too worried about the orientation of the pages. Some will be the correct orientation. Some will be too the side, but it doesn't matter because a lot of them will be decorated. So here I did chop off the bird's head. So part of his head is going to be in one book and his body is going to be in the other. So I'm having some page creep, which is to be expected. Page creep is as you add pages to your signature, because of the thickness of the pages before them, they start to stick out a little bit. I am not a fan of page creep. Usually I trim that off. Sometimes I leave it, but in this instance, I think I'm going to trim it off. And these are the misprint pumpkins. And I just tore off the borders and folding in half after tearing it in half. Okay, and last but not least, I decided not to use the purple paper you see over to the right, but I'm going to use this matte paper, tearing off the white borders. Then I'm just going to fold this in half, tear it in half. And I'm actually going to cut a square out of this. So to find the square, I'm folding one corner over to the opposite side and then marking where I need to trim the paper to make a square. And then I'm just going to use this square to measure the other paper and tear the excess off. So now I have two squares, and I'm going to find the center of those squares by just folding corner to corner and pressing down a little bit. I'm going to take a pencil and mark it so that I can see it, and then I'm going to start folding this to make an envelope. So I'm going to fold the opposite sides in, and then I'm going to fold what will be the bottom or top up, and then fold the other side up. And I'm going to do the same thing for this other square. I'm going to turn it into an envelope. So yeah, I decided not to use the matte paper as pages and to make these little envelopes to use as embellishments in the journals. Again, I decided not to use the purple. That was just completely too different from everything else that I'd used. And now I am just lining up my signatures, making sure everything is in place and getting ready to stitch them together. Usually I hem and haw over this process and take days and days to actually stitch it together, but I am trying to just commit and go ahead and put the journal together. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm using some binder clips to hold the pages in place, and then I'm using a paper clip on this one because the binder clip doesn't quite reach the index card file folder. So I just want to make sure that that doesn't move. So you're just doing a little cleanup, and then I am going to measure to find the center. So I'm using the center finding side of the ruler, and I'm going to mark it in the center. And then on this one, I go up 1.5 inches and mark. So this is going to be a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. So I'm just checking my measurements. Okay, so next I'm going to get my punch cradle and place the journal inside. Use my retractable pick, which is actually an awl. It's a type of awl. And I'm getting out 2 paper clips that I have opened up, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with those. So here, after I punched the hole, I put that paper clip in there that I'd opened so that my pages stay in position. I find that this is really beneficial. Even though I have them clipped, having that paper clip and the awl stuck in there just keeps that hole open, keeps it lined until I am ready. Then I'm using 3 lengths of waxed thread. Again, I'll link to everything that I'm using in the description box below. And I'm just going to thread my needle and start stitching. So I took out the paper clip and the awl was kind of in the way. So I'm putting the paper clip back on. So I'm going ahead and stitching through the middle hole. I'm going up through the top or the bottom, either one, then all the way to the opposite hole, and then back through the middle. I can do a dedicated video on how to do it. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. So I'm just adjusting the length of my tails and pulling them tight, making sure that everything is good and tight before I start tying it. Checking the outside, making sure those are nice and taut, and rechecking. And so now I'm going to go ahead and knot this. Usually I leave them hanging for charms, beads, other decoration, but I'm going to go ahead and tie these in a bow. And that is it. First booklet is stitched and ready to go. On to stitching the next one. Again, the little trick with these are like medium sized to large paper clips. They're not the jumbo paper clips. So the width of the metal of those paper clips that I'm using to hold the signatures in place is the same as the width of the awl that I'm using to punch the holes. So once I punch the hole, I stick that paper clip in there, keep that hole open. It's not such a big issue when you're just using paper and this vellum, but when you're using cloth, the holes tend to disappear and close up. So it's a great way to know where that hole is, especially when you're coming in from the outside through the cloth. If you've made journals with cloth before, you understand what I mean. So here I'm measuring again to find the center. And then I'm going up 1.5 inches on either side. Putting my cradle back together and punching the holes with the awl. Using that paper clip to keep that hole open. Doing the same thing, repeating the same process. And then this middle hole, I'll leave the awl in there. Yes, leave it in there so that the hole remains open while I get my thread and needle together. So, and it just seems so much easier doing it that way with those paper clips and leaving the awl in there. You would think it wouldn't make a difference, but it makes a huge difference. So I've done the stitch, 3-hole pamphlet stitch, making sure my tails are even, tightening everything up, and going ahead and tying my knot, and then tying a bow. So this is both journals stitched and ready to go, and I'm looking at the page creep and deciding that yes, I am going to trim that off. So I did go ahead and trim off the page creep. Now I am going in and closing the pockets. Also, I'm just checking the pages, making sure everything is as it should be. Here I'm closing the other pocket. Then I'm going to do the same process in the other journal. Check all the pages now that they've been trimmed and close the pockets. And I'm also somewhat smoothing the pages out, making sure they're folded well and all of that. So now I am going to go ahead and commit and get these covers done. So I'm just placing the pieces, seeing how I want the pieces to look on the covers. And then I'm just going to go ahead and start gluing. So these are die cuts that I had from other projects, and I usually keep them because I never know if I'm going to be able to use them again. And they came in quite handy and worked really well together for this. So I'm just deciding how I want to position this piece. Again, I have issues with committing, so I decide, okay, just add the glue and place it. So, and I'm using Barely Arts glue. It has a needle tip so that I'm able to put glue on the tiny little areas of that die cut. And here I'm just going to add the black frame. And make sure everything is pressed down. And I use a paper towel also to make sure I get up any excess glue. I'm going to use this number label. And I'm pretty sure that this label is from Shabby Dabby Doodah. And there we go. That's it for this cover. So on to the next one. I'm going to use the cluster. And then I'm going to use the paper that I tore. It's an aged tea stained paper, and I think I had some colored paper with it that bled onto it, so it has a pinkish tint to it. Then I'm adding the cheesecloth, and then I'm going to glue down the cluster. And I'm just looking at the inside page to see how the glue is looking since the vellum is a little translucent. And here I'm just adding some flowers that I had on my desk that went well with the cluster. And I'm gluing down some loose pieces on the cluster, making sure everything is down well. Okay, so one last thing that I decided to do, and this is something that I had been thinking about, being able to make envelopes a specific size, even if you don't have any tools to do it. So what I did was place my journal on the vellum to see how the envelope flap would look, and then I marked the opposite side to get the size of square that I needed. And in this case, I folded that one, and I shouldn't have folded it, and I was trying to see if I could revive it or recover and use it anyway, and eventually I will. But so I tried it again on another piece of vellum, and then I just trimmed where I marked. I didn't fold anything. So I trimmed where I marked, and I also got the measurement, which was 7 1/8. So then I just trimmed the other side to 7 1/8, because for the envelope, you always need a square, as far as I know, for this type of envelope. So I did the same process to find the center, folded corner to corner to find the center, and then started folding into the center. So the same process that I used to make the map envelopes, I'm using to make these vellum envelopes, but I needed them to be of a particular size because I want to use them on the inside cover of the vellum covers. So you have even more translucent fun going on with the covers. So I'm just doing what I normally would do for an envelope. If you're interested in learning how to make these envelopes, I do have a video on my other channel, SCRAPCRAFTASTIC, that shows how to do it. Then I'm just using my We Are Memory Keepers corner chomper to round the corners, and I am putting the envelope together. And I'm just going to use a little Barely Arts glue to close up the envelope. And I'm just rubbing that in so that it will disappear and also not cause any rippling. So this is going to fit perfectly on the cover, and I'm just deciding, do I want to leave it open for a pocket just to see what that would look like. So I am going to do that. So I'm only going to glue on 3 sides. And this will also make the vellum cover a little more sturdy. So it's not just an embellishment, it also serves a purpose. So the envelope is on the cover and it still has that translucent look. So now I'm going to try and smooth out that fold in the other piece of vellum because I don't want to waste it. And I'm trimming it down to 7 1/8, just like the other piece. And I'm trying to cut off as much of that fold as I can. I'm doing the same process to find the center, marking the center with my pencil and folding up. Then I'm going to go ahead and round the corners. Cut out those little notches. Do a little rounding so that I don't have so many sharp edges where the notches were. And I only do this on the top where the top flap is going to be. It doesn't really matter at the bottom because all of that is covered up. So, and I'm just going to add the adhesive to make the envelope. Again, rubbing it in really well so it doesn't pucker and so that the glue just blends into the vellum. And I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing, adding it to the cover of the other journal, adding glue on 3 sides only so that it can also serve as a pocket. Adding a little glue to the cluster, another area that needed to be glued down. And that is it for the adding the envelopes to the inside cover. Let's see what they look like. Make sure they work. And that's it for this video. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe. I will be back to share how I embellish these. Thanks for watching. Bye.